They said if used, this could blast every inch of Indian territory. The number of AK-47s, the grenades, the other weaponry which has been recovered, the lives lost. How much is the quantum of money which we are spending on all our paramilitary forces and the quantum of money that we are spending in all our counter-terrorism operations, maintenance of those forces? This is the exact amount of money which should have been spent on roads, which should have been spent on healthcare, which should have been spent on education, which should have been spent on drinking water. We are now eating into a large part of our national resource and diverting it into a counter-terrorism apparatus which we are trying to build up in this country. Now, these are not the only costs. The costs are terrorism has started undervaluing democratic institutions. It's extremely difficult even in terrorist-prone areas. We saw it in Punjab happening. We've seen it in states of Northeast to have timely elections, to get the fear out of the minds of people. In Jammu and Kashmir, terrorists have been openly announcing at times that, well, whoever comes to vote, we'll give him this television set as a gift. So you undermine democratic values. The impact on governance is adverse. Now here you will have a state government in the northeastern states, you will have a state government in Jammu and Kashmir, which may be endeavoring its best on various welfare schemes. But the prime concentration of the governments then is not as far as governance and those schemes are concerned, but how do we get rid of this insurgency which has prevented any developmental activity? It has prevented economic activity. Nobody makes investments, whether it is foreign investors or domestic investors, and go and invest in an area where jihadis carrying AK-47 are moving on the roads, where plants are going to be blasted. Therefore, when the People's War Group in Andhra Pradesh has been targeting industrial establishments, it not only hurts one establishment, it disrupts the entire economic environment in that state. Now, these are all different kinds of costs that we have been paying for it. And therefore, when this parliament through its joint session decided that we need a special law, we were not the only country in the world which thought we needed a special law. Most liberal democracies in the world, the United States, needed it. When 9/11 happened, President Bush said, a war has been launched against us. 3,000 people died because of 9/11. But what does the country say where 65,000 civilian lives and 10,000 security lives are lost? In fact, we used to answer them by saying, it is now that you have realized what a concern in a country like India is going to be. And when we looked at our normal provisions of law, we suddenly realized that in small criminal cases, convictions may be easier, but in high crime cases, the rate of conviction is close to 6%, where the chances of acquittal are 94%. And if you are a terrorist, where an ordinary witness is not going to come and depose against you, where the writ of fear of the terrorist is even in the judge's mind, then is 6% rate going to go up in case of terrorist offenses, or must we have a special machinery? And we were not the only country in the world which decided to have this law. Under the United Nations Resolution 1373, all member states were asked to have that resolution. The United States had a series of legislations, from the Patriot Law to the other law. They provided for secret military trials and so on, because they could see the emerging strength and menace of global terrorism and how that country was to combat them. Europe, which saw only very small consequences, most European countries decided to have an anti-terrorist law. And therefore, we also decided what were our features when we decided to have it, and why were those features necessary. And I will now show that out of these features, what you have done to the existing law that you have now brought about, and how the existing law is going to be wholly insufficient to deal with the kind of menace which exists in Indian society. Well, I'll not only show how some of the provisions have been deleted, but then, sir, we have Mr. Nariman, a very eminent counsel, would say that we only in a lighter vein use a word. At times, is law an ass? I will now show, after showing these provisions, that you now have those stringent provisions for the Essential Commodities Act, you have it for the Narcotics Law, You have it in 4 states in India to deal with local gundas. But when it comes to international mercenaries and fedayeen, you say we are thinking in terms of human rights and therefore we are going to delete those laws. That is that the kind of legislative process by which the drafting of such legislations is to take place? Sir, as far as POTA is concerned, the first provision of POTA, which was of extreme importance, our other laws did not define terrorism. Therefore, it became after TADA, there was some difficulty in the definition of terrorism in TADA. And it was for this reason that there was an anomalous definition in that law. We only learnt by experience that in the unfortunate case where our former Prime Minister, Mr. Rajiv Gandhi, was assassinated, the Supreme Court curiously held that the offense against those who were accused of assassinating him did not fit into the definition of terrorism. Now, it was that reason that persuaded us to have a more elaborate definition of the phrase terrorism. Therefore, harboring a terrorist, punishment for terrorism, funding a terrorism, using a place for terrorist activity, all this was brought in the definition of terrorism itself. The second important feature was any proceeds of terrorism, any monies earned from ransom, from terrorism, from looting, was declared unlawful, and this was rightly declared unlawful because there is a principle of civilized jurisprudence that no man can retain to himself the profits of crime. I steal. Allow me to explain, Mr. Sharma. Yes, allow me to explain. I'll come to my areas of objection also. Where areas we are in agreement with, I don't think we should spend any time. And the reason was that if a man steals somebody's property, if a smuggler earns money from smuggling, if a narcotic dealer earns money from selling narcotics, then profits of crime cannot be retained by him. We did not have any other law where profits of terrorism can be retained by a person. Therefore, we put a provision that profits of terrorism are to be confiscated and not to belong to the terrorist itself. The third provision that we had put was that you bring a ban on several terrorist organizations which will be included in the schedule itself. This act, we had the Unlawful Activities Act, but the Unlawful Activities Act in 1967, and there was a select committee which went into that issue, was brought in only to ban certain kinds of organizations. Now we had a ban on terrorist organizations which was prescribed in the terrorist law itself. One of the most important provisions was, and I'll show how that provision has been virtually destroyed. And without that one provision, the entire life and soul of an anti-terrorist law is lost. The manner in which it has been drafted in the existing law itself serves no purpose. Terrorists today, particularly cross-border terrorists, today are very heavily technology savvy. Their communications are not only through intercept, they are through wireless equipment and various equipments. Our intelligence forces and our security forces endeavor very hard to intercept their communications, and it's only when they are able to intercept their communications that they are able to prevent the commission of a terrorist offense. Therefore, intelligence gathering against terrorism is one of the important instruments by which a terrorist activity could be stalled or prevented. And therefore, this power has to be given to the security forces, to the police forces, who are in a position and who are actually in the field fighting terrorism. This was really the heart and soul of that legislation itself.
If you are making all these points, the impression will go that these provisions are not there in the new amendment.
Well, I'll come to the existing law after I finish the earlier law.
No, all these provisions are there introduced in the Unlawful Activities Prevention Act. We are amending that law and introducing these provisions.
I am afraid, with my utmost respect and affection for the Honorable Home Minister, if the Home Minister seriously reads the provision with regard to interceptions of communications that he has brought in, I will demonstrate it just now in the next 5 minutes or less. It has been diluted, made impossible, and will really serve no purpose. It's a provision in which a huge change itself has been brought about from the existing provisions. The next provision, sir, and I'm just mentioning it, was with regard to admissibility of confessional statements which are made before senior police officers, and then the person confessing is produced before a judge, and before the judge he is asked whether he has voluntarily made it or not. He has a right to make a statement before the judge. This provision, which is essential and has been essential in all earlier anti-terrorist law, is even today present in many other laws, even in a more stringent form, today has been diluted and taken away from this act. And I can tell you, sir, that in a large number of cases under the anti-terrorist law where convictions have taken place, but for this one provision, convictions would not have taken place. Stringent bail laws, because the normal principle is that either initially or at a later stage, except in some rare offences, bail has to be granted. The Supreme Court in one of the cases said that it's bail and not jail which is the rule. And therefore you have several laws where special hard bail provisions have been created. POTA had that hard bail provision. And the rationale behind that hard bail provision is that if a Fidayeen or a suicide squad member is granted bail, it would be too naive to expect that he would come and appear in the court on the next date of hearing. People who are trained either to kill or to get killed are not going to submit before the jurisdiction of an Indian court and say, I got bail last time, I will come and appear on the next date of hearing. They are going to flee from the process of law. For these international terrorists, now we have said in the amended law, the normal bail provisions will apply to you. There is also, sir, a special provisions for witness protection, special judge and so on, which had been created. And then there is a review committee for various areas that in case the power is abused or misused, you will certainly have an option first to go to the review committee, then of course the judicial review itself is possible. What has the new law done, sir? Let me not go into the minor changes which the new law has made. The Honorable Home Minister said, with regard to interceptions, POTA as a law had a detailed chapter on interception of telecommunications. Interceptions of communications which terrorists from one part of the world may send to another. And it is through those intercepts that you are able to either prevent the commission of the offence, or if the offence is committed, you are able to introduce it as admissible evidence. You have to empower police officers who are dealing with it in order to go and then collect evidence. And there is an urgency in these investigations. Supposing a police officer in Kashmir, a police officer in Northeast in Nagaland, a police officer in any of the terrorist affected areas, in a Maoist area, is told that such and such module or group is functioning. The police officer, if he is empowered under the law, takes the permission of his DGP, which was required in the original law, and then starts intercepting communications. Who could have an objection to retaining this provision, which is an essential instrument in fighting terrorism? What the government, sir, now has done is to repeal the entire chapter and bring in section 46 of the new Unlawful Activities Prevention of Amendment Bill 2004. And all that this says is, notwithstanding anything contained in the Indian Evidence Act or any other law for the time being in force, the evidence collected through interceptions via electronic or oral communications under the provisions of the Indian Telegraph Act or the Information Technology Act or any other law for the time being in force shall be admissible. Now, what is the impact of this? Sir, even after I have read it, I can see the Home Minister, Honorable Home Minister, is not convinced that this, let me give him the benefit of doubt, is a genuine mistake. What does the Indian Telegraph Act says? The Indian Telegraph Act says there is one provision, section 5, that if there is a public emergency or an issue of public safety, the center of the state government can take possession of telecommunication equipment. Now, in an emergency, you can do it. We don't have a state of public emergency today. There is no need to authorize a station house officer of a police station located in a terrorist area to take possession of terrorist telecommunication equipment. All you have today, there are very sophisticated interception devices which act which play a key role globally in fighting terrorism. So only if under this provision some evidence is collected, it can be led in law in evidence.
Notwithstanding those provisions of the...
Sir?
I'm sure you have read it. Yes, I have also read it.
Why don't you read the full bill first?
Sir?
Notwithstanding anything contained in the Indian Evidence Act and its stock of interception and retention as evidence. I'm page 11, 46. Please
Sir?
read it.
Why don't you read
Sir-
it first and then...
Sir, I am afraid, so my disappointment with this bill increases. If this is the ruling party's understanding of what is written, I leave it to the wisdom of the future generations. I leave it to the luck of the future terrorists when this law is made applicable to them. Notwithstanding what is contained in the Evidence Act, evidence collected under the Telegraph Act and the Information Technology Act will be admissible evidence. The rules of admissibility of telecommunicative evidence in Evidence Act, notwithstanding that, if under these two laws or any other law evidence is collected, that evidence would be admissible evidence. So under the Indian Telegraph Act, you collect evidence when you take possession of the telecommunication equipment. Under the Information Technology Act, you collect evidence through a computer resource. You collect evidence in offences relating to hacking. You collect evidence in offences where IT is going to be misused. I am still, sir, unable to see any rationale, any logical rationale where the entire chapter dealing with interception of terrorist communication should have been deleted. Because once you delete this chapter and you substitute it by a solitary provision that what is admissible is evidence collected through interception under other laws, then you have to look at the other laws. The other laws are not laws under which in Kashmir or in Mizoram or in Nagaland or in any other terrorist prone areas, the police officers directly are empowered to intercept. And therefore, you've actually had cases. I need not refer to cases because in one of them, this issue was raised, the appeal is still pending before the Honorable Supreme Court, where this parliament was attacked, where one of the issues was that the procedure you prescribed has not been followed and therefore intercept evidence is not legally admissible. You are going to open floodgates that police can't illegally do certain kind of things. And therefore, to delete the provisions related to interception and bring it by such a mild provision is something, sir, which I find it extremely difficult to accept. Sir. Sir?
Use in this is very important. Any equipment, electronic equipment can be used for collecting the evidence, and that evidence will be valuable. That evidence will be admissible in a court of law. Computer, anything can be used for collecting the evidence.
So I don't on this question disagree with the Honorable Home Minister. But what the Honorable Home Minister now says is only a part of this section. A part of this section is when evidence is collected under these following laws through electronic equipment, it will be admissible evidence.
That is as far as the telegraph communication is concerned.
Yes, telegraphic communications. Under this law, as I read it, under this law there is no provision. Under this law there is no provision where police officers dealing with terrorism, investigation of terrorism, prevention of terrorism have been authorized to collect that evidence through intercept of telegraphic communications. I would urge, and therefore what my honorable colleague Mrs. Swaraj said, that refer it to a standing committee. Call for the best witnesses, police officers and constitutional and legal experts as witnesses. Therefore, it is precisely this.
But we were saying the same when you brought Pota through an ordinance and you had to call the joint session. When in both the houses this demand was made, what was your attitude? Today you are sermonizing. What was your government's attitude then? Let it go on record.
I think, Mr. Anand,
No, sir.
You will get the chance to
Sir.
put your viewpoint.
Sir, even at that stage,
What that's?
this is a repeal law. and 32 days before the law was to lapse, the urgency of repeal was such that we only think in terms of urgency of the repeal, even though we make a mess of the existing law that we are drafting. If that is the attitude of the government, it's only posterity which will lay down whether what is being done today is the right approach or otherwise. Let me, sir, give you another example. TADA had a provision which everybody regarded as a harsh provision for the purposes of grant of bail. The TADA provision was that no person will be granted a bail till the public prosecutor gets an opportunity of opposing, and bail will be granted only if the judge is satisfied that on the face of it the offence is not made out. The Supreme Court Constitution bench dealing with the provisions of TADA dealt with that provision. Therefore, in POTA those provisions were diluted. And the diluted provisions of POTA were that for first 1 year the POTA bail provisions will apply, and thereafter the normal law will apply. And even under that provision, some language changes keeping in tune the judgment of the Supreme Court were made out in POTA. Today, I heard the Honorable Home Minister saying that, well, keeping the human rights in mind, we have now decided to balance our fight against terrorism with maintenance of human rights, and therefore, as far as bail is concerned, the judge will decide under the normal CRPC whether a bail is to be granted or not. And these extraordinary provisions that you have under POTA for a period of 1 year also are not required. So I just started making a broad analysis of how we are dealing with other laws on the same question. So now we have a law which fights Fidain, which fights international terrorism. And the normal criminal procedure code is to apply. A man, if he is arrested, can be granted bail, oblivious of the fact whether he is going to appear after getting bail on the next date of hearing before the court or not. We have hundreds and hundreds of cases. The finance minister will be able to give the exact figure, where foreign nationals, when the moment they get bail under the Narcotics Act, that is the last that they ever appear before the court. And here we are not dealing with foreign nationals dealing with narcotics. We are dealing with international terrorists. We are dealing with people who come from across the border with the object of killing or getting killed, who are threatening the sovereignty of this country. And for them we say, well, if they are released on bail, we must be considerate about their human rights. Sir, exactly the same language which was there in TADA, that is, throughout the trial, the bail provision will be the same. POTA had it only for 1 year, is today present in the Narcotic Drugs and Psychotropic Substances Act 1985. So when the Congress government is in power in 1985, you decided as far as drug peddlers are concerned, the normal rule is no bail. The Prevention of Damage to Public Property Act 1984. The Congress government was in power. Those who damage public property, difficult provisions for bail. The Scheduled Caste and Scheduled Tribe Prevention of Atrocities Act 1989, CRPC not to apply, special bail provisions to apply. Essential Commodities Act, a similar provision. Now you have not only these, you today have at least 4 states in India where verbatim the same bail provisions which were under TADA are still applicable. Which are those states? Maharashtra. Who brought that law? The Congress NCP government in Maharashtra, Makoka. Don't those people, the local gundas who are arrested under those laws, have human rights in the explanations being given by the Home Minister? You are concerned with the human rights of the Fidain, but your local or Swadeshi gundas are entitled to a different, mafias are entitled to a hardened bail provision where bail is not to be granted. But if a terrorist is arrested, a bail is to be granted. Which is the second state? Karnataka. Who brought this bill? The Congress government. Who's continuing that law? The Congress government. Under the Karnataka organized crime law. You have 2 other states. The TDP brought that law in Andhra Pradesh. There is a similar law in Gujarat in dealing with organized mafias. So the state legislatures in this country have thought it fit to bring laws where hard bail provisions are going to be there, even within India. So the local, for dealing with your local mafias, indulging in organized crime, you have 4 states in India which have the same law. Dealing with drug peddlers, you have a hard bail provision. Dealing under Essential Commodities Act, you have a hard bail provision. Dealing with narcotics, you have a hard bail provision. Then sir, then am I exaggerating when I am saying that why are you being soft on terrorists? Why must terrorists not also get the same hard provisions which are there in all other laws? These are laws, some of which are time tested. These are not laws which were brought either by the United Front government or the NDA government. Most of these laws have been brought by the Congress governments. And therefore, am I again exaggerating when I say that 32 days before the bill was to lapse, you brought this law really keeping in mind the signals of vote bank politics rather than the requirements on the ground, how terrorism is to be dealt with? Sir, you have another provision in this law, which you had it in Pota, which has been deleted, where confessions made to police officers were made admissible. So let us just look at the anatomy of a terrorist offense when it takes place. When mercenaries and fidayeen come and indulge in a terrorist offense, normally they have not been arrested on spot. They either kill or get killed. Those who attacked Parliament was a suicide squad. The Parliament was rescued and the members were rescued. The people here were rescued by the heroic acts of our officers. But the 5 terrorists died on spot. So we could not arrest them. When the late Shri Rajiv Gandhi was assassinated, those of the inner core team blew themselves up along with the victim that they targeted. Who did the investigations look for? The investigations always look at people who have been a part of the larger conspiracy, and as a part of that larger conspiracy, who have been giving support, who have been giving money, who have been giving logistical support, who have been giving weapons, who have been giving vehicles, who have been providing for the escape of those people, who have been indoctrinating people. So when Parliament was attacked, we were looking for Ghazi Baba. We were looking for people who were giving logistical support. When the late Shri Rajiv Gandhi was assassinated, the actual culprits died on spot. Those who were a part of the conspiracy, the investigations would lead to them. Does the government really believe that to find out and discover this chain, we are going to easily find some eyewitnesses who will say that when these assassins went to Ghazi Baba, in a closed door meeting, I was present and I heard this being said. I heard this indoctrination being made. Obviously, we don't expect them. And it is for this reason that in terrorist offenses, investigations all over the world, you have a special provision to how confessions of the accused are to be, and some other people are to be dealt with. The TADA had a provision where confessions were made admissible, and the confessions were admissible in law simpliciter. The Supreme Court made some observations and said, this is a bit too harsh. Please dilute this law. If a person is making a confession, have some checks and balances that the confession is not misused. This law was, this fact was looked into. And after an extensive debate, the Pota provision said that the confession should be made before a very senior level police officer, an SP or above. And within 24 hours, the man making the confession must be produced before the judge. He will have an opportunity of telling the judge whether this confession he has made voluntarily or otherwise, and if he says it is involuntary, the judge will also get him medically examined. We have diluted that law in Pota itself. And today you have a law where the entire provisions in relating to admissibility of confessions is completely deleted now. If you delete the provisions, so please ask some of your agencies, some of your SITs which have dealt with the cases, what would be the impact on the investigation of terrorist offenses if provisions relating to confessions being admissible are completely deleted itself? Are completely deleted. We have, sir, cases after cases. I have not the least doubt in saying Read the judgment of the Supreme Court. Read the judgment of the Supreme Court. I have cited that example repeatedly in the assassination of the late Shri Rajiv Gandhi. Take the confessions out, and this country would have made a spectacle of itself, where a former Prime Minister is assassinated in presence of thousands of people. And but for those convictions, the convictions could not have taken place. And today we have a law where for dealing with terrorism you say we are going to delete the confessions. Sir, if you have thought of deleting the confessions in cases of Pota itself, why should you have admissibility of confessions in several other laws? I have just now given you example of the laws relating to the 4 states in dealing with organized crime: Maharashtra, Gujarat, Andhra Pradesh, Karnataka. Why are confessions admissible against organized mafias? Why are confessions admissible under the Narcotics Act? Why are confessions? Why even my learned friend, the Honorable the Law Minister is here. Even statements made to customs officers and enforcement officers under economic offences. These are not laws we brought out. These are laws which have been time tested. Statements made to...
You are absolutely misleading the House. There is no bar of use of confession so far as income tax, customs are concerned in the statute. But in the Evidence Act, there is a bar. No statement made before a police officer shall be used in evidence. These are 2 different areas, and the report of the Law Commission has said that even the confession before customs and income tax should be excluded. This is the report of the Law Commission. So therefore, don't misuse between the confession, between the customs and income tax. Pali will intervene in this and say these are 2 different areas. The police in this country has been fashioned to beat up people right from the British days. And if you are arguing in favor of confession before police, I'm very sorry, there will be no rule of law in this country.
Sir, I am grateful to the Honorable Law Minister. I am puzzled. I was disappointed. I am puzzled. I am puzzled. But let me try and resolve the puzzle. Let me try and resolve the puzzle that he has put the Honorable House into. The Honorable Law Minister says that under the Customs Act, statements made to the customs officers are also admissible, even if you are an accused. It can be used against you in trial. You can be convicted on the strength of that statement. Before the enforcement officers, statements made by you are admissible, you can be convicted because of that. Law Commission says repeal that also. But then for those lesser offences, you should have thought of making a beginning and seeing the consequences. You have put the law upside down by saying, let in Customs Act, Income Tax Act, Enforcement Law, Narcotics Law, against organized crime. And all these laws, admissibility of statements and confessions remain. But there is something sacrosanct about terrorism. If somebody confesses to a terrorist offence, we must give him a special exemption as far as admissibility of that evidence is concerned. So when I said I am puzzled, the rationale of the Honorable Law Minister's logic is... I think, sir, you'll...
No, you are referring to my name. I tell you, your puzzle is born out of your mind. You don't understand that. The difficulty is that wherever the legislature says that it is admissible and wherever it is said it is not admissible, that is the rationale. In so far as police is concerned, the legislature said no statement, read me 161 and 162 of Code of Criminal Procedure bars it. So therefore, and the test, you are a very learned advocate, the test to use a confession is, firstly there are 2 tests. One is the confession must be voluntarily, secondly it must be true. Unless these 2 conditions are satisfied, no statement can be, no confession can be used. Yes. So you don't mislead the House on these issues.
Sir, I think the confusion which my friend the Law Minister was creating is now more confounded. It is his right to the extent when he says that this provision has to be made by law. Who quarrels with that? But under the Customs Act, you have a provision, under the enforcement laws you have a provision, under the tax laws you have a provision, under narcotics law you have a confession that section 25 will not come in way. Under the organized crime laws in the 4 states you have a provision. So what is so sacrosanct that you must not have this provision for terrorism? That's the test. And
will be put behind the bar for his life, or he may lose his life. Death punishment will be.
but won't that happen in Maharashtra, your state, Mr. Home Minister?
That's a different.
That's not a different question.
That's a different.
I'm sorry.
Argument. You wanted
That's
the
not a different
rationale, I'm
question.
giving the rationale.
That's not a different question. In your home state, in your district of Latur, I am sorry, in your home state, in your district of Latur, if a person is arrested under Makoka, his confession is admissible. But if a terrorist is arrested, his confession is not admissible.
You said why should it not be admissible? And I am saying that if you have to punish a man with death punishment, it should not be. It should be taken very carefully.
Sir, I repeat the example. If in the Home Minister's home district, a local gunda is arrested under Makoka, his confession will be admissible. But if a terrorist is arrested under Pota, his confession not be admissible. That is why I said you have created such an anomaly in the law that even for lesser offences,
Confusion in law.
even for lesser offences, you are going to have a harsher provision. But for terrorism, which is eating into the vitals as far as our system is concerned, you say that confessions are not going to be admissible at all. Sir, even under Makoka, the punishment can be death or life. Under the narcotics law, the punishment is life. Under customs law, enforcement laws, punishments can be up to 7 years or even more at times. Why is it that you only want a lighter provision, a lesser provision in dealing with terrorism? What, sir, is this going to lead to?
They are friends.
What, sir, is this all going to lead to? This is going to lead to a situation in a country which has made one of the maximum sacrifices in the face of terrorism, that our investigative agencies are going to have their hands chained when they want to create intercepts of terrorist organizations. Our investigative agencies are going to have lack of evidence when they start prosecuting terrorists. Our investigative agencies are going to find it extremely difficult beyond a point even to oppose bail in terrorist cases. At the same time, under other laws for lesser offences, the provisions are going and the procedures are going to be harsher. So if you look at the big picture which seems to have been created, let me just end with where I had started from. Is the object of this entire exercise to really improve this country's ability in fighting terrorism? The unequivocal answer is no. Is it going to chain our investigative agencies, cripple them in investigating and prosecuting terrorism? The answer is yes. Is this going to send a signal to terrorists and others across the world that a country which has made one of the largest sacrifices in the face of terrorism is now going soft and is repealing its anti-terror law? The obvious answer is that we are going to say yes, this country is. And sir, let me just say the government has the majority on its side to rush through with this bill. But let me urge the Honorable Home Minister, we do hope that the situation in our fight against terrorism improves. And God forbid if it doesn't. When history is written as to when did we send soft signals that we are soft on terrorism, I'm afraid these two bills are going to be mentioned there in bold print, and the Home Minister's government is certainly not going to come out with glory in that situation. Thank you, sir.
श्री आर के आनंद।
सभापति जी, मैं आपका धन्यवाद करता हूं कि आपने मुझे बोलने का मौका दिया। मैं स्टैट्यूटरी रेजोल्यूशन को अपोज करने और सरकार के बिल का समर्थन करने के लिए खड़ा हुआ हूं। सबसे पहले मैं गृह मंत्री जी को मुबारक देना चाहता हूं कि उन्होंने ये काला कानून ऑर्डिनेंस के द्वारा खत्म किया। जेटली साहब ने बड़े जोर से भाषण दिया है यहाँ। दर्जन की बातें हो रही हैं यहाँ। मैं आपसे पूछना चाहता हूँ कि 99 में जब कंधार का इंसिडेंट हुआ, जब हमारे हवाई जहाज का अपहरण हुआ, तो एनडीए के मंत्री रईस को लेके कंधार गए। वो क्या रीजन था?
कोटा के बाद ही पार्लियामेंट पर अटैक हुआ था।
कोटा से पहले हिंदुस्तान नहीं था क्या?
क्या ये
नहीं नहीं खामोश रहे।
सभापति जी, मैं कंधार के मामले में रिमाइंड कराना चाहता हूँ। मैं चाहता हूँ कि ये बताएं कि उस हवाई जहाज में कौन बैठा हुआ था जिसको छुड़वाने के लिए गृहमंत्री जी वहाँ गए, और उस बैग में क्या लेके गए। उस हवाई जहाज में एक कंपनी का डायरेक्टर बैठा हुआ था, जो कंपनी सारे वर्ल्ड की करेंसी बनाने की मशीन बनाती है। इन्होंने उस इंसान के लिए इंसान की स्थिति से कंप्रोमाइज किया।
You refute it.
ये बताएं आप। Yes.
Nobody can be allowed to trivialize a debate with such baseless allegations. Sir, since an important statement of this kind has been made, either the External Affairs Minister or the Home Minister, who deal with these two areas, who are in the know of the facts, also under whom who has access to all agencies, must stand up immediately. And the Home Minister must say,
Mr. Jeffrey, I know it personally. He has been my client. You don't know about it. I'm telling you.
the Home Minister,
You know nothing about
he
it.
has to confirm or deny whether this statement is
I
correct
know
or
it.
not. And if
I will give you the name of the person.
sir, you are not going to allow the member to make a statement of this kind.
I will give the name of the person.
No, no, no.
चलिए, मैं आपकी बात करता हूँ। मैं मेंबर के बारे में नहीं कह रहा, मैं तो ये कह रहा हूँ, मैं ये कह रहा हूँ कि मैंने मंत्री का नाम भी नहीं लिया। मैंने तो ये कहा है कि ये कहने की क्या ये
Have you realized the consequences and the seriousness of this trivial statement which has been made?
Please tell us what. आप बैठिए. Let him please.
जी, जब ये कानून पार्लियामेंट में पास हुआ,
Are you allowing that statement?
हम सबने कहा था,
Then you are setting a precedent.
No, no, why?
Sir, please. Sir,
No, please tell
he
me.
has said something which is trivial, which is obnoxious, which is false. Are you allowing that to be made on record?
Under what rules I should explain it to you? Tell me. Because it is not unparliamentary.
Not all.
मंत्री को जाने की क्या जरूरत है?
करूँगा. किसी के ऊपर एलिगेशन हो तो मैं करूँगा. एलिगेशन नॉट ए पर्टिकुलर पर्सन.
जब ये कानून
रेफ्यूज कीजिए ना. आप रेफ्यूज कीजिए.
जब ये कानून पार्लियामेंट के सदन में पास होने आ रहा था, हम सबने कहा था कि ये काला कानून है ये, और इसको पास नहीं करना चाहिए। ये भी कहा गया था कि इस कानून को could not really have been at best with Pakistan. It is worse than Kandahar, and where to get the aircraft. And a suggestion or an allegation has been made that somebody who brings the currency low, the services of that somebody they utilize by the then minister. I was the then minister. So without taking my name and allegation at this time, I of course denied. No, sir, please. I will go a little further. There was, in fact, nobody of this nature that was consulted. This was a decision of the Cabinet Committee on Security. The three officers that were sent with great difficulty in advance had never set this in place. Plus, we did not even have a diplomatic representation then in Afghanistan. We had to send somebody to Kandahar, and all that we could do was to send a junior officer from Islamabad via Quetta to Kandahar. He was the first representative. The three other officers that were there, I shall not take their names. One of them is today the head of the country's RNCW. The second is the head of the country's intelligence bureau. And the third is the ambassador, current ambassador of the country in Kabul. Now, these were the three officers who were in fact present in Kandahar, and they were conducting all the negotiations. It is a great pity, sir, that a member of the ruling alliance has made this allegation. I request you, no withdrawal, no expansion. I do request that the Honorable Home Minister and the distinguished Minister for External Affairs are also here. I am ready to withdraw from the House this minute. But then too, in whatever fashion you wish to do so, please inquire into this allegation, because the allegation is so demeaning, not just to me individually as a person, and I've never responded to all the very many things that have been said about Kandahar. But at some appropriate moment, I will say, this is not even the acceptable fact, but this is a very demeaning allegation today. It's not just against an individual, it is against an office also. And in a fashion, it is against the country too, because the country was under severe strain. 170 of the country's 56 of the country's citizens had stayed in an aircraft from the Christmas Eve to 31st in that freezing cold of Kandahar. And the lavatories, when I went to cover the aircraft, I do not wish to go into all this. I am very sorry, sir, that the honorable member has found fit to make this allegation. Your person has got to be, and the honorable inquiry of this nature will please be ordered by me. And
Sir, I think we were discussing a very important issue, and we would have liked the members to be present in the House. And if they had spoken on these two bills, they would have expressed their views on many important issues also. If they have walked out, we are sorry about it. we will request you, sir, to go through the record and anything which is objectionable to expunge it.
Yes, after going through the records, if there is objectionable statement by the honorable member, it will be expunged.
पुष्पावती जी, जब ये कानून पार्लियामेंट के सदन में पास होने जा रहा था तो हम सबने कहा था कि ये काला कानून है, उसको पास नहीं होना चाहिए। ये भी कहा गया था कि इस कानून को मिसयूज किया जाएगा और इसका अब्यूज होने के बहुत चांसेस हैं। मुझे याद है कि नेशनल ह्यूमन राइट्स कमीशन के चेयरमैन ने ये ऑफिशियल स्टेटमेंट रिलीज की थी कि ऐसा कोई कानून बनाने की जरूरत नहीं है और ये कहा था कि हमारे पास ऐसा मौजूदा कानून है जिनको अगर सही तरीके से इस्तेमाल किया जाए तो ऐसा काला कानून बनाने की जरूरत नहीं पड़ेगी। ये भी कहा गया था कि इस कानून के गलत इस्तेमाल करने के अंदेशे बहुत ज्यादा हैं। चेयरमैन सर, जिस कानून में बेल ना मिलने का नियम हो, मुल्जिम को साबित करना पड़े कि वह बेकसूर है और जिस कानून में रिव्यू की पावर को लागू करने के लिए 2 से ज्यादा साल लग जाएं, वह काला कानून नहीं तो क्या है? वो क्या कानून होगा जिसमें पुलिस के आगे गवाही दी हुई एडमिसिबल माना जाए? यह कानून नहीं बल्कि तानाशाही का एक नमूना है। चेयरमैन सर, बेसिक प्रिंसिपल क्रिमिनल लॉ का यह है कि 100 गिल्टी पर्सन छूट जाएं, एक गलत आदमी को सजा नहीं मिलनी चाहिए, निर्दोष आदमी सजा नहीं मिलनी चाहिए। मुझे याद है कि एल के अडवाणी साहब ने यहां कहा था कि हम देखेंगे, इस कानून का गलत इस्तेमाल नहीं होगा। कहना बहुत आसान है। क्या अडवाणी जी अपने एश्योरेंस पर इस सदन के सामने खड़े उतरे? सर, झारखंड के चीफ मिनिस्टर ने अपने बयान में कहा कि झारखंड में इसका इस्तेमाल सबसे अच्छा और बहुत ज्यादा तरीके से किया गया। मैं इस सदन को बताना चाहता हूं कि सबसे गलत इस्तेमाल इस कानून का अगर हुआ तो झारखंड में हुआ। 250 से ज्यादा लोगों को पोटा के अंतर्गत गिरफ्तार किया गया। इसमें से 10 से ज्यादा बच्चे थे, बच्चे जिसकी उम्र 12 से 14 साल की है। सबसे कम उम्र का लड़का 12 साल का था जिसका नाम गया सिंह है और सबसे बड़ी उम्र का 81 साल का है जिसका नाम राजनाथ महातो है। वे लोग गिरफ्तार किए गए हैं जिनका कोई ताल्लुक आतंकवाद से नहीं है। किसी की जमीन का झगड़ा है, किसी की जाति का झगड़े हैं। 17 साल की लड़की को पकड़ा गया है गुमला डिस्ट्रिक्ट से, रोपनी खरिया, जिसका कसूर यह है कि विमेन एम्पावरमेंट पर वो गांव की औरतों को पढ़ाती हैं। इस कानून ने वकीलों और पत्रकारों को भी नहीं छोड़ा है। सुशील कुमार बरसीन एक अधिवक्ता हैं झारखंड के, जो 2000 से पकड़े गए हैं और आज तक रांची के जेल में हैं। नगेंद्र शर्मा हिंदुस्तान टाइम्स के रिपोर्टर हैं, उनको भी पोटा में पकड़ा गया। उनका कसूर यही है कि वो अपने पेपर में बैंड ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस की एक्टिविटीज को कवर किया करते थे। झारखंड में जवान औरतें, बच्चे, दलित, ट्राइबल, स्टूडेंट्स, गांव वाले और काश्तकार बंद हैं। इससे ज्यादा पोटा का मिसयूज क्या हो सकता है? इधर गुजरात की तरफ देखा जाए तो 99.9% लोग जो पोटा में गिरफ्तार किए गए हैं वे मुस्लिम कम्युनिटी के लोग हैं। गुजरात में इतने रॉयट्स हुए, हम सब ने इंडियन एक्सप्रेस पढ़े हैं जिसमें कंपेयर डिस्क के बारे में जिक्र किया गया है, जिसकी डिटेल्स हैं कि किस तरीके से प्लान करके रॉयट्स कराए गए। एक कम्युनिटी के लोगों को जान से मारा गया। वीएचपी और बीजेपी के कई एमएलए इसमें शामिल हैं, उन पर कोई कार्रवाई नहीं की गई। कई मंत्री भी हैं। ये पहली बार हिंदुस्तान की हिस्ट्री में हुआ है कि नेशनल ह्यूमन राइट्स कमीशन ने सुप्रीम कोर्ट में रिट पिटीशन फाइल की और केसेस को एक स्टेट से लेकर दूसरे स्टेट से ट्रांसफर करवाया। जिनको पकड़ना चाहिए था वे गुनाहगार खुलेआम रॉयट्स के दौरान में घूम रहे थे, पुलिस उनके साथ में थी। जेटली साहब ने जिक्र किया कई प्रोविजंस का, जिसमें से एक प्रोविजन उन्होंने किया इंटरसेप्शन ऑफ कम्युनिकेशन के बारे में। मैं इसके बारे में थोड़ा सा मैं बताना चाहूंगा। सेक्शन 43 जो पोटा का है और जो नया कानून बनाया गया है उसका सेक्शन है 46। 46 के हिसाब से जो भी एविडेंस इंटरसेप्शन के माध्यम से आती है वो एडमिसिबल मानी जाएगी। ये नए कानून में लिखा गया है। जो पुराना कानून था वो सेक्शन सेक्शन 43 था। इस सेक्शन 43 में सबसे ज्यादा खामी यह थी कि सुप्रीम कोर्ट की जजमेंट के हिसाब से यह कहा गया था कि किसी इन्वेस्टिगेटिंग ऑफिसर को पावर नहीं देनी चाहिए कि वो उस इलेक्ट्रॉनिक डिवाइस से टेप रिकॉर्डिंग करे। ये सेक्शन 43 में जो पुराना कानून था उसमें यह कहा गया था कि a police officer equivalent to rank may determine that an emergency situation exists that involves immediate danger or death, and he may authorize in writing the investigating officer to intercept such wire, electronic or oral communication if an application for an order approving the interception is made in accordance with the provisions of Section 1 or Section 38 within 48 hours after inception has occurred, begin to occur. सुप्रीम कोर्ट की जजमेंट के हिसाब से इन्वेस्टिगेटिंग ऑफिसर को कोई पावर नहीं है कि वो इंटरसेप्शन करे। इंटरसेप्शन करने की पावर किसी इंडिपेंडेंट ऑफिसर को दी गई है और इंटरसेप्ट वही हो सकती है जितनी इंफॉर्मेशन जो उस केस के लिए लागू होनी चाहिए। इस जो सेक्शन 43 में की गई है ये सारी टिप रिकॉर्डिंग करके जो प्राइवेट कन्वर्सेशन है वो भी रिकॉर्ड हो जाती हैं। इस गलत प्रोविजन को ये सेक्शन 46 से ये अमेंड किया गया है जिसके हिसाब से जो भी एविडेंस इंडियन टेलीग्राफ एक्ट के हिसाब से पकड़ी जाए वो जायज मानी जाएगी। दूसरी बात जेटली साहब ने कही कि कन्फेशन के बारे में जो इनके प्रोविजन से पहले ए कन्फेशन मेड बिफोर ए पुलिस ऑफिसर हैज बीन मेड एडमिसिबल। ये सेक्शन 32 है जिन्होंने कहा कि नॉट स्टैंडिंग एनीथिंग कंटेंट इन द कोड इज द क्रिमिनल प्रोसीजर कोड और इन द एविडेंस एक्ट बट सब्जेक्ट टू द प्रोविजंस ऑफ दिस सेक्शन ए कन्फेशन मेड बाय ए पर्सन before a police officer not lower in the rank of police and recorded by such officer will be admissible in evidence। कानून की नजर में पुलिस ऑफिसर की जितनी भी एविडेंस रिकॉर्डिंग होती है वो बिल्कुल एडमिसिबल नहीं मानी जाती है। इस सेक्शन 32 को डिलीट करके कन्फेशन का प्रोविजन यहां इस एक्ट से डिलीट किया गया है। इस 2 साल के दौरान में एक अजीब सा केस सबके सामने आया था जिसमें एक अफरोज नाम का आदमी पकड़ा गया जिसको कहा गया कि इसने ब्रिटिश पार्लियामेंट जो लंदन में है और रियल्टो टावर सिडनी में है और इंडियन पार्लियामेंट को अटैक करना था सितंबर 11 को और उस आदमी को 2001 को गिरफ्तार किया गया और पुलिस ऑस्ट्रेलिया गई, अमेरिका गई और इंग्लैंड गई। इंग्लैंड में आने के बाद उन्होंने कहा कि इस आदमी के खिलाफ बड़ी सख्त एविडेंस है और उठा के उसको बंद किया पोटा के अंदर। 2002 में पुलिस ने कोर्ट के अंदर बयान दिए और यह कहा कि उसके खिलाफ पोटा चार्जेस नहीं बनते हैं। तो ये अजीब सा प्रोविजन बनाया, अजीब सा कानून बनाया जिसके हिसाब से लोगों को 2-2 साल उठा के बंद किया। मैं ये समझता हूं कि ये जो रिपील किया गया, काला कानून किया गया है, ये बिल्कुल ठीक किया गया है। इस कानून को ऑर्डिनेंस के हिसाब से जल्दी जल्दी रिपील कर देना चाहिए था और ये जो नया एक्ट बना है इसमें सारे प्रोविजंस हैं जो सेफगार्ड करते हैं एक्यूज की लिबर्टी को। बेल के प्रोविजंस भी हैं। बेल के प्रोविजन के अलावा पूरा मौका दिया जाता है एक्यूज को कोर्ट के आगे वो पेश हो। मैं समझता हूं कि इसके अंदर सारे प्रोविजंस वो हैं जो कानून के नजर से बिल्कुल ठीक है और मैं इस बिल का समर्थन करता हूं।
Mr. Anand, before you conclude, you have made some remarks which is been denied by the opposition. Will you kindly withdraw those remarks?
Sir, I stand by.
Let us not go into further details. Otherwise.
If you don't mind.
If they have felt hurt,
yes, he did.
I'll say that man was not traveling. But I am saying that he is answerable to the parliament as to why did he go and take the terrorists.
No, let us not go into all that detail. Are you going to withdraw those remarks?
I will withdraw the allegations for that individual is concerned. But I am saying that why did the minister go from here and take the terrorists?
That is a different thing. That is a different question altogether. Now, if you are withdrawing that whatever you have made, are you withdrawing it? So,
I am withdrawing for that individual.
no. You see, there is some objection is taken. You made certain statement alleging certain that. No, let there not be any.
Okay, withdrawing.
No,
I am withdrawing.
You are withdrawing it.
I'll withdraw it.
All the statement made by this withdrawn.